Hey, welcome to the Gig Life Podcast. I'm your host, Stevie Taylor. It's 2021. This is episode 106. Stephen Housden. Here we go. My guest today is Stephen Housden. Stephen Housden is regarded as one of the finest guitarists in the world. Well known as guitarist for Little River Band for more than 2 decades, he's also played and recorded with such music legends as Warren Zevon, Glenn Frey, Dr. John, Christopher Cross, John Entwistle from The Who, Renee Geyer, Albert Lee, Steve Cropper, The Seekers, Noel Redding, Marcia Hines, John Farnham, The Bushwhackers, and many, many others. Born in the UK, Stephen was inspired to play the guitar by watching Singing-Cowboys on television as a child. After moving to Australia at the age of 8, he quickly discovered rock and roll and fell under the magic of such lead guitarists as Hank B. Marvin and Chuck Berry. He formed his first band in high school. Hendrix and jazz great Wes Montgomery became influences as Stephen worked hard on learning as much technique as he could while also striving to develop his own distinctive style. That style brought him to the attention of some of Australia's most successful recording acts, and over the coming years, Stephen was highly sought after as a band member and recording session player. In 1981, Stephen was asked to join one of the world's most successful acts, Little River Band, as their lead guitarist. Since then, he's toured the world many times over with them and co-written many of their songs. Over the years, Stephen has conducted music theory and improvisational seminars for guitarists and written columns for magazines such as Sonics and Australian Musician. He's also toured schools with his highly successful one-man show, The Evolution of Rock Guitar. In the late 90s, Stephen and his family moved to Ireland. Long inspired by Irish music, Stephen now enjoys the opportunity to play with some of Ireland's top musicians as well as writing and recording with his various groups and his solo music. So, ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Mr. Stephen Housden. All right, I think we're rolling. Stephen Housden, welcome to the Gig Life Podcast.
Very happy to be here. I've been listening to your stuff, and growing up in Sydney, it's fantastic to hear some of the stuff from my old friends and people like Harry Bruce and Jim Kelly, my brother, and others. I've listened to even people that I've not met yet, but it's great to hear their stories, and it takes me back and fills me in with some of the things that I didn't know. Stuff about Harry I didn't know. He's done so much, hasn't he? It's amazing.
You know, that's funny you mentioned. I've had quite a few people say to me that they listened to Harry's and there was a whole bunch of stuff they didn't know about Harry.
Yeah.
He's a mysterious man.
Yeah. I mean, he did so much so young, you know. Like, he's not that much older than me. He's only a year or two older than me. And when he was 16, he was doing stuff that I was dreaming of, you know. It's amazing.
The story about how he developed his bass slapping technique, that's hilarious.
Yeah,
I asked him because he's got that unique style with the shake of the hand, and he said he was on acid and he was just slapping the water in the bath.
He was mad for the practice. When I was on tour with him and Renee Geyer, you know, we'd always go past his hotel room and you could hear him slapping away, you know, all day.
Yeah, that's really cool. So you're in Ireland, and I'm in Sydney, and it's 9:10 here in Sydney on a Sunday morning, and it's about 10:10 in Ireland on a Saturday. Is that right?
That's right. Yes. Yep. It doesn't seem like a Saturday night at all.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Things have changed.
Yeah. Can I ask? Because I don't. I mean, we're kind of living in our little sort of COVID bubble here in Australia at the moment. What's the effect COVID's had on Ireland
Well, it's pretty devastating. It's terrible for the music industry, you know.
Yeah.
And to couple that, the Brexit thing is not very good either. You know, I was just reading in the paper this morning, like, you know, English musicians who would normally be touring Europe, it's going to be a big deal for them to go now, visas and all this sort of stuff, you know, and plus Irish musicians and European musicians going to England. So there's that. And the COVID thing is, the last gig I did actually was in Australia when I played with Barry Leaf at Tim Partridge's 70th birthday. And that was in February. And 2 months later he died, which was came as a real shock to us. But, people hear us, you know, people hear us suffering and I feel bad for the pubs especially, you know, like the pubs have been closed for forever and then they say, oh, you can open for a while and, you know, and they've done sort of well. A lot of the pubs have been running, you know, online live streaming stuff, and now they're getting a little bit of government support. But it must be really tough, you know, because that's an environment that's definitely shut because people get drunk and talk really loud and spit at each other, and so it's, you know, it can't be open. So it's a shame. And the pub life here is, you know, we have like acoustic sessions where we just get down just for the fun of it, you know, and sit around in a circle and play. So all that's out. We're sort of missing playing with each other as musicians.
What's been upsetting here for, you know, a lot of the musicians is, pardon me, governments have put really, really tight restrictions on the pubs and the clubs and stuff like that regarding patrons and no singing, no, you can't dance, you have to sit down, you have to be spaced. Yet they're still holding these big sporting events. You know, we've got the cricket in a couple of days, you know, 40,000 people packing into a stadium and they're standing and they're yelling and they're screaming and, you know, it's a bit of a double standard if you ask me.
The sports have always had it over the musicians, I think. Yeah, in some ways. Yeah, you know, the big crowds go to the sports, and always, you know. Yeah.
Now, the first time I heard of Stephen Housden, and we'll talk a little bit more about this gentleman, but a guy named Billy Ryland, and the backstory there to Billy Ryland, to me, the link to me is Billy and my father Murray Taylor lived on the same street in Taita in the Hutt Valley in New Zealand, and they grew up together. Wow. Yeah, and then Billy moved to Australia, and we sort of carried on with our lives, and then they reconnected late 80s, early 90s, I think it was, and Dad came over to Sydney for a holiday to catch up with family and stuff, and met up with Billy, and Billy gave Dad this cassette tape of a demo tape, and Dad brought it home and he gave it to me, and I can't remember how many songs were on that demo tape, but Dad said to me, there's one song on there, the guitarist from Little River Band's on it, and I'm like, oh really? Oh wow, cool, because I love Little River Band, and I used to set my drums up and play along to Little River Band cassette tapes. Yeah, so that was pretty cool, and yeah, when I heard that song, I instantly knew that was the song he was talking about, and the name of the song is If You Don't Want My Love, You Can Have My Money, and I tried to get hold of Billy yesterday, but he hasn't replied yet, so I'm still going to try and track that song down. And so that's the first time I heard of you, and then so tell me how you met Billy and
so we had a small band. We were living in Caringbah, and Malcolm Wakeford was the drummer, and we met at school, you know, when we were about 14, and played with bands together on and off till I joined Little River Band. And anyway, we wanted to get an organist in the band. We thought the Hammond organ was incredible sound, you know, for the time. It still is. You know, ranging from psychedelic stuff to soul-y sort of stuff. And anyway, we put an ad in the Sydney Morning Herald, and Garth Porter, who was to become the organist from Sherbet, calls us, or we call him. I can't remember which way around it was, and he says, "Look, I think I've got this gig." And which was going to be Sherbet, which was going to be a huge band, but they weren't then. Mm-hmm. He said, but come in anyway, So we came in, and when we got there, he said, oh, I've got this gig, and it's a great one. But meet my friend Bill, and it was just Bill Ryland. So we got to meet Bill, and we had a bit of a play together, and Bill was working with Stevie Wright from the Easy Beats. He'd just come back from England. The Easy Beats had split up, and he formed a band called Ratchet. Mm-hmm. And anyway, Bill said to me, I'll try and get you in the band, because he liked my playing, So that's how I met Bill, and Bill, we got on really well. He turned me on to a whole bunch of new stuff. He was into things like Poco, the band Poco, and they had all this funky stuff, and Bill had a certain funky way of playing, which I hadn't encountered before. So I was, learning stuff off Bill, and it was a great time. But it was sheer fluke, as is everything in life,
That's it, eh?
How you meet people and get gigs and things like that.
Yeah. Do you remember those? Do you remember that recording session, recording those demos with Bill?
I've heard the demo, I had it here. I think I've got it on cassette or something.
Yeah, I had the cassette, yeah.
Yeah, and I thought I'd had it on a hard drive, but I mustn't have duplicated over. Mm. And I think I know the one you mean. I think so. Yeah. But I can't remember playing them. I can't remember a lot of stuff. It's so long ago.
Yeah, that's it.
But I know when I hear it, it's me and how I played at that time,
Yeah.
I think I was very influenced at the time when we did it by Amos Garrett. And Amos Garrett had done the solo on the Midnight at the Oasis by Maria Mulder. Mm-hmm. That was back in around 74. And I was like, everyone was blown out with his playing. He was doing like double bends, 2 strings at a time, and all this sort of stuff. And I think if it's the solo you're talking about, it's very influenced by that.
Very good. Let's flip it right back now to how it all began. And you were born in Bedfordshire in the UK?
Yeah, I was born in Bedford, the main town in Bedfordshire. And in 1959, we emigrated to Australia. And I think, I'd always wanted to go to America, because that's where all the cowboys and Indians and everyone in the 50s was into that sort of thing, like England was kind of like black and white, like a black and white movie. It was all fog and overcast, and you always saw these movies of these guys riding horses and maybe playing a guitar or something, and bright, beautiful sky,
Yeah.
But Australia was pretty much similar anyway, It has beautiful open blue skies. And when we arrived in Australia, it was like unbelievable. It was like being on holidays, but the holidays just kept going, I
had the exact same feeling, because we, obviously born in New Zealand, we moved out here in 1994. And up to that point, I'd never left the North Island of New Zealand. I'd never been on a plane, never crossed over to the South Island.
Yeah.
All my family had come back to Australia for holidays and stuff. And to me, it was, when we left, it was like a holiday. We left Wellington, it was 15 degrees, and then the doors opened at Sydney Airport, it was 38 degrees.
Yeah.
It's like you punched in the face.
Yeah.
So, I know what you mean.
Yeah, we ended up in Cronulla for a little while, and we were walking along the beach, and I always remember that feeling. It's like, blimey, this is amazing, because Bedford's in the middle of the country, there's no sea or anything like that.
Right.
And to be walking along by the sea, it was great.
Do you have memories of, like, because you left, you would have been what, about 8?
Was it eight? About 8, yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember that time in the UK fondly?
Yeah, I don't remember much at all. I know I wanted to play guitar even like when I was 5. I remember it was probably to do with the cowboy movies or something, and maybe Elvis, because Elvis came out in 56 or around then, a bit before actually. But I can remember hearing Rock Around the Clock and stuff like that. It's just coming out, but my hands were too small for a guitar, and my parents bought me a ukulele, which I learned like little melodies on it and stuff. But when I got a little bit older, I think I forgot it all for a while. But when we moved to Australia and I was about 9, then the whole thing came back. I really want this guitar. I really want a guitar. I want a guitar. And there wasn't like a lot of music shops in those days. There just wasn't, and there was a guitar in the sports store window in Cronulla, and it was £10 or something. And my parents said, if you save up your pocket money every week, we'll buy it for you for your birthday, So I saved up for, about 6 months, and my birthday came and I got this guitar, and it's like, wow. And for some reason I actually thought that I'd just be able to play it,
Yeah.
I was like, ever the optimist.
Yeah.
And I couldn't. And I've got to learn like now.
Yeah.
And the next day we went out, and there was one guitar teacher that lived nearby, and he was from Holland. He said, look, I'm moving back to Holland, but I'll teach you before I go. And I think I took about two or three lessons a week or something. And I just learnt chords, lots of chords, and got my hands around the guitar, So I didn't at the time. I didn't really think about playing lead or anything. I just wanted to play whatever, And I played chords. My mum played accordion, and Dad sang, and they had a duo. They would do clubs on the weekends. Dad had a day job. He was a painter and a paper hanger. And Mum was going out to work at the time too, and they were saving for a house, and working on the weekends. So, I thought, maybe, Mum, you could teach me. She said, no, I can't play guitar. So I went out and had these lessons, and then he went back to Holland. I had another teacher, and by then I'd saw someone else. Not many kids had guitars. Nobody my age had a guitar, But I saw an older kid, and he had a guitar, and he started playing a melody. And I thought, blimey, how can he know to pick the strings with his right hands that his left hand is pressing down? I thought it was amazing, And then soon after that, I heard the Shadows. And when I was 11, for my next birthday, I got an electric guitar, a little small 5-watt amp, and I just used to get Shadows records and learn as much as I could.
Mm.
And I'd usually get.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
You talk about Hank Marvin and the Shadows. I mean, that's yourself, Jim Kelly, and Harry Bruce.
Yeah,
three of you
that,
guys.
yeah.
They're heavily influenced by Hank Marvin.
It was a great way to learn, because the Shadows, like Hank Marvin is a beautiful player, like he plays a melody, and he draws you in with the way he plays the melody, and he had this together when he was about 17, which is incredible, But I think learning to play melodies with feeling was a great way to start, like a lot of kids later, for them guitar is like, playing as fast as possible, but it's, Jim was talking about technique, and there's more to technique than just playing speed. There's technique in playing a melody, and you could slide down to a note, slide up to a note, bend a note, use the vibrato. There's tons of ways, staccato, muting the strings with your, palm of your hand, all sort of ways to play notes to express things, and I think, learning off Hank Marvin was great. Great place.
Who else were you listening to at the time?
Well, that was about it, really, and until the Beatles came up, then, like the Shadows started to kind of fade out. The Shadows, that time, it was actually a really fantastic time because it was the in-between time of when rock and roll started in the 50s, and then Elvis went into the army and music became a bit middle of the road for a little while, and until the Beatles. And then the stuff that was a bit different was there was the Shadows, but in America there was a whole bunch of other bands playing surf music. And I think it was a time when you could be in a band. Before you were in a band because you were backing a lead singer, and it was like so-and-so and the so-and-sos. But when all this sort of garage-type surf music started, the band became a band, Maybe the lead guitarist was a bit more well-known or whatever, but they were a band. And the Beatles were a continuation of that, So I think it was a very important time in rock and roll. But the Beatles came out, and then the Shadows started to be, feel a little bit, we're moving on towards this stuff. And the Shadows, we didn't realise at the time, but when they were doing things like Roll Over Beethoven and rock and roll music, they were written by Chuck Berry.
Mm-hmm.
And back in the day, there used to be this thing called the World Record Club, and you could join it and you get 4 3 albums, and then you'd buy an album each month if you wanted to. So the first 4 albums we got, one of them was Chuck Berry's greatest hits. And then I realised, right, the Beatles are playing his music. And then I started to realise when he was doing a solo, he was kind of making it up, it wasn't necessarily a set solo. So that's when I started to try to improvise. I didn't know it was called improvising. I called it mucking about. That was the start of learning to improvise, Chuck Berry, And then further along the line, things. The 60s escalated pretty fast. When you think the Shadows were in like early 60s, 61, then 63, the Beatles was really getting known. And then there was this whole wash of bands. And by 67, you've got Hendrix, and Cream. So it was in 5 years, things like exploded. It's amazing. So there's a lot to listen to, yeah.
Yeah, all right. So when did you start thinking that I need to get into a band for myself?
Well, as soon as I could play, I wanted to have a band, but there wasn't many kids played, and like now everyone plays guitar or something, But back then there wasn't too many. But my first year of high school, I met up with an old friend. He was one of the first friends I had. We moved to Cronulla, and I met him, and he moved away to a different suburb, and then we moved to Caringbah, and I went to Endeavour High School, and we were all in the first year of the high school. It was when the high school opened. It's a sports school now, but it was just a normal high school then. And Lee Harkness is his name. He walks up to me on the first day. I said, "Oh, wow," and we got into conversation, and because he'd moved back into the area, and I said, "Do you know anyone that plays guitar?" And he said, "Oh, there's a guy at our church that plays, and they have this meeting every week, with young people." And I wasn't necessarily into that, but someone who played guitar, I thought, "Oh, okay, let's check this out." And anyway, we met this young guy, and Alan Trudinger, who passed away a couple of years ago, unfortunately. We all remain friends. I'm still real good friends with Lee and everything, But anyway, so Alan and me played together because we could both play, and then we said to Lee, "Well, you've got to get a drum kit." So Lee got a drum kit, and we formed this band. We were called the Horizons, and we played Shadows stuff and all sorts of things in like church coffee shops and all these sort of places, wherever we could work, basically. So that was the start. And a little bit further along, I met Malcolm Wakeford, and he took over on the drums. Lee was great in taking up the drums, but he wasn't a natural musician as such, And Malcolm was a natural. He just started playing, and we went, wow, Right. He didn't even have a drum kit, but he sat down at a drum kit and started playing, So eventually he became our drummer, and we just did lots of local gigs. They used to run dances and things, back in the day. No, it wasn't like pubs and things. It was like no alcohol dances, for kids.
Yeah, about 1968, you became professional musician.
Around then.
Yeah, and you also said you worked in a bank and you had some various other jobs. So I'm curious as to what those other jobs were.
Yeah, well, I worked in the bank for a while. I've worked a few little different jobs, but one job I went back to a few times. I'd worked there in my school holidays, and it was a music store in Sydney called Nicholson's. And I think Harry worked there too, actually. Listening to that was something I didn't know. He must have been there a similar time to me. And I worked there when I was 15, but then I went back there when I was about 18 or something like that. And I met a lot of friends who I'm still friends with, which is great. We were in the packing department on the fourth floor. They used to, back at the time, there was lots of country music stores, and Nicholson's was the store they'd order all their equipment from, And my job was to pack the stuff up to send it out to the stores, And they had all sorts of guitars, it was amazing. If you could get a bit of time, you'd sneak a look. They had these Burns of London, Rickenbackers, and all sorts of stuff, But I never got to plug them in, really.
Just dream.
Yeah.
One day.
But one good thing about working there was that there was a lot of people to learn off. There was a guy, Frank Holforth, I'm still good friends with him. He was a jazz guitarist, and he turned me on to a bit of jazz stuff, and he played something, and I said, "Oh, can you teach me that?" He says, "No, you can get the music, you learn it, and I'll come and tell you whether you got it right." So I got the music, and I learned the whole thing, and he helped me with anything I got wrong, And there was another guy playing bossa nova stuff, and there was all different people, and you could, it was great for a young guy like me who, I'd never met anyone who played jazz before or anything like that,
Mm. So the reading. So, when you said he just gave you the music, just try and learn it. So were you trying to listen by ear and then sing the notes on the page? And
I think I'm not a great reader, And this was all it's a chordal thing.
Chords, okay.
All written on the stave. They didn't have the what do they call it now? Tab. I can't read tab even. I can read music better than I can read tab, I think.
Yeah, right.
But I've never been a sight reader that could just pick up a bit of music and go through. I'm not. It didn't happen for me. I tried and I eventually figured there's other people who can do this a lot more easily than me.
Right.
But I still can read music and I understand music, which is what I need. But I would have taken a while. I would have taken probably a month or something to learn this thing, and it was pretty complicated. But I can still play it.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So we're in the 70s now, and this is around the time you met Bill, right?
Yeah, about 1969, 70, yeah. I think, probably 70, yeah, because I think I was just about to turn 19, which I would have done in 1970, yeah.
Yeah, so that's you joined Stevie Wright's band then.
Yeah, and
So
we used to play wine bars and things,
Right. And what was no, it's cool. It's cool. And what was it like playing with Stevie at that stage in his career?
Yeah, it was great. It was funny, because when I was young, the Easy Beats were like, they were like the Beatles. You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
But when I was playing with them, we just took it in our stride, which is kind of weird, And we used to have a lot of fun together, actually. We used to have great fun together, all of us, And Stevie later got into heroin, which is like shocking, But in the early days, we were just all buddies and we had a great time, real lot of fun. Living in the suburbs and all that and going into the city. That Bill lived in Paddington, and it was a whole different world,
Very cool. All right, so what happened after that? So was it Nitro?
Yeah. Nitro was Malcolm and myself and Peter Deacon on bass. Peter played bass and keyboards. And we were in walking distance from each other, we could walk up to, we all lived with our parents at that point, And we started out, we got, John English was our singer. Do you know John English, who John English is?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep. So John was our, I don't know how we met John, I can't remember now, but John was the singer and we got some gigs and we got to the gig, it was a gay club and we used to back artists. We could read a little bit, we weren't good readers, but the fact that we could play rock and roll and read, not like the guys who played in clubs who couldn't play rock and roll at all, they could read, So we were right for backing people like John Farnham and the Normie Rowe and people of the time who were happening, and we could read well enough to read a chord chart and do a good backing job because we knew most of the songs anyway. And John was with us initially, which he's an incredible singer, and we could do all stuff. We really loved the band Frey, with Paul Kossoff was one of my heroes on guitar, And so with John singing, we could do Free and all that sort of stuff. But he'd gotten the gig with Jesus Christ Superstar, playing the part of Judas. So he eventually left, and then Nitro became a three-piece. And we used to do all sorts of gigs. There was a lot of gigs back in the 70s. It was, I know now, especially for bands playing original music, it's really hard. And we weren't actually playing. We wished we had enough original to play all original, but we didn't write fast enough, And what you used to do in those days was you go to the import shops and get records that no one had heard and find good songs off them, And, I'd find stuff like Deep Purple, and no one's heard of that band, not at the time anyway. And I get a couple of songs off that and all these different import records that weren't even released. And people, you give the feeling that you were original because you were playing your own versions of other stuff, And it's interesting then you could play original music and get booked. Now it's like you've got to be a cover band or something like that,
Yeah. How was your listening taste? Well, were they changing? Who were you listening to?
Yeah. Well, at the time.
Well, I guess you would have been listening to. I mean, if you're getting into Deep Purple and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think Free was a benchmark for us because they had a singer, but they were three-piece musician. You know what I mean? Guitar, bass, and drums, and the economy they used to like they'd leave the space and everything so that when the solo would come in, it could open up and everything. And there's something about the way Free play. It's for the band, There's nobody showing off in Free. They're just, you can feel this. They're all holding it in this, and they hold it back, and it's big. It's just, I don't know how to explain it. So you can feel the immensity of it because the drummer's holding it right back, that no one's racing ahead of the beat. And they seem to be a benchmark for us. But we loved all sorts of stuff. We were listening to Small Faces at the time, but fantastic. And The Who, and all sorts of stuff,
Okay, so we're on from Nitro. How long did Nitro?
Nitro went to about 74 around then. And I think, what happened was Malcolm, the drummer, his girlfriend was really good friends with Marcia Hines, and she was looking for her first band. She'd played with bands before, but she wanted to form her own band and go on the road with her own musicians and all that. So.
And then this is after the popularity of Hair and
she wasn't. She was popular, but she had. I don't think her first song was out. Fire and Rain was the first hit, I think, and I don't think that had come out at that time. It was just about to come out, maybe. But anyway, Sue, Malcolm's girlfriend at the time, said, "Look, Marcia's looking. She'll give you guys a go, see if you're any good." And around about that time, like, Nitro was kind of playing rock and roll and all that, but we were getting more and more interested in funkier sort of stuff, And, there was Kool and the Gang and all this sort of really fantastic grooves, James Brown and all that. And you'd hear it if you were walking through the city somewhere in Paddington or something, you'd hear music coming out of discos with really good funk grooves. And for me, the rock and roll was starting to get a bit passe or something, we wanted to play more like that. So what we'd do for Marcia, we thought, let's ask Bill, because Bill Ryland, because he's funky, and he is real funky, and Peter, who was playing bass with us, he could try out as a keyboard player, and we tried out and we got the gig. So I think we rehearsed Marcia was living in Bondi, and we rehearsed in our lounge room, I think. And it was just a really, really good time. And Peter couldn't do the gig for too long because he eventually went into Superstar as well as part of the orchestra. And it was great. We picked all songs what we really liked. We were right into the Average White Band and Rufus with Shaka Khan. And we had a really great repertoire, and we just picked our favourite songs. And one of those songs was talking about Midnight at the Oasis, which that was for the first time for a long time. I learnt the solo, because I'd always avoided learning solos for a while because I wanted to develop my own style, but there's so much going on in that solo that I learned it note for note, that was a turning point for me. And a little bit later, the Jackie Ozarski joined as bass player, and he became musical director, and we were rooming together. And I think something like the Car Hotel in Melbourne, everyone used to stay at this place, underneath the highway. And I said, to Jackie, because Jackie had a great musical education, in Hungary. And I said, how does this guy come up with this solo against these chords, because it had pretty complex chords, it wasn't Chuck Berry, it wasn't a 12-bar thing, it was complicated chords. And he sat down and he just explained how music works to me. He said, well, this, first of all, we find out a key, where one chord would come from and where they vary. And it was like the penny dropped. I'd never really thought about this stuff before, I mean, some people do. I think Jim Kelly probably did think about this. And plus he probably had lessons from jazz players and got into that circle of people quicker than me, So once Jackie told me about that, it's like, wow, what have I got to do I've got to learn all these scales. I've got to, I start with the major scale because that'll be the starting point. So that was kind of, I was on a bit of a mission to move ahead from where I was,
So how much were you practicing a day back then?
I've never practiced heaps, Maybe 3 hours a day would be a max for me, because normally you'd be going out and doing a gig for a couple of hours at least, But I do quite a bit of practice, I'd say. And back when I started getting sessions and things like that, I'd be playing a lot. When I look back through my diary, I thought, blimey. There was one gig when I was with Stevie Wright. One day I looked at the diary and we did a gig at night in the afternoon in Sydney. Then we flew back down to Melbourne and did a gig that night.
Yeah.
Nobody would do that now.
Oh no, you
wouldn't get through customs.
Well, at the moment you'd be surprised though. That does. I mean, because I guess it's a lot easier and faster to get through. No, I'm talking about pre-COVID, but to get through, you can book yourself in on your phone. It's kind of maybe it's easier to
actually,
travel like that.
Australia is pretty quick actually compared to the rest of the world. Actually, yeah. But it still surprised me that we were doing two gigs in the one night. It must have been. I'm thinking it must have been afternoon or early evening, and
right.
Yeah. So, but
Right, so you've the penny's dropped, and you're learning these new scales now. Had your sort of outlook on music started to change now that you'd heard that? Or I've sort of started to understand those different parts of the music, the jazz?
Well, I started listening to more jazz. I'd always loved Wes Montgomery. Wes Montgomery's my ultimate hero, as a musician. And I'd always loved his playing. So I'd listened to him, but I'd copied little bits and all that, but I just didn't understand. It was too beyond me, And then once I got an idea of what's going on in music, I just started to practice. And I went to a seminar at the conservatorium. This guy called Steve Urquaga came out from America, and he had a system of how he learnt scales, and he did it one way, and his way was a little bit complicated for where I was at, and I figured a way that would work for me, and I just worked through doing little patterns all the way up. And then if I had to learn, that was, say, the major scale, then if I wanted to learn melodic minor or harmonic minor, it was usually changing one note within what I already knew. So then I'd go through and learn all those patterns. And when I was working with bands, I'd do that as a warm-up at home. I'd go through all my scales and stuff. It might have been working with Barry Leaf or someone like that, and I'd go out that night. And I wouldn't try to force the scales and things into my playing at the gig, but I'd maybe try some things, But what I did notice was, because I was practicing all the different shapes you could come across, I just started playing things more naturally and easily, because your fingers are used to going to different places, You're forcing your hands to your muscle memory into different areas. So that was a good thing.
Okay, so how long did you stay with Marcia after Jackie?
I was with Marcia from about 75 on and off till 78, like mostly on, but she took a break. We did, I played on half of her first album. She did half in Melbourne and half in Sydney. And at that point, she started going out with Mark Kennedy, and he took over on drums. Malcolm was playing drums before that, and Malcolm plays on one of the tracks, at least on that record too. And then Mark came into the band, and we put a really big band together, which was awesome. 4 brass people, and Snell on percussion. Snell de Silva.
Yep.
Mark was on drums, and we had 2 keyboard players, and Jackie was on bass, and they were all like jazz musicians. So I was kind of like asking them stuff and all that.
Yeah, cool.
And we had a really good time. It was like a family on the road. Really fantastic time, and I just learned. One of the things I mentioned this to Richard Gaughan, was the sax player, and I mentioned this to him, and he totally forgot telling me, but it meant a lot to me. I said, I'd really love to play like a sax player, because sax is monophonic and it kind of, it flows when a good player plays, and I said, how do you do it? And he said to me, think in phrases, the notes will come, and that really meant a lot. I thought, oh, right. So, like not worrying so much about the notes, but thinking about what you're playing, you can't always get the notes right, but just thinking in phrases, you're telling a story, So that was, of all the influences, that there's people, like Jack Ozarski, he really pushed me. He got me playing this like a lot into the half tone, whole tone scale, which is a bit out there, And, he said, oh, everyone plays like that, and he pushed me a little bit further. And I look back, I really appreciate all the little things. And Bill Ryland too, like we live next door to each other, and we would be jamming all the time. And, he had a little sort of technique of rhythm. I still can't do it, but I can, It did influence me, yeah.
Okay, so when did you start? Because you played with Barry Leaf for quite a while at the Musicians Club in Sydney. So when were you doing that right from the start of that run Barry had at the club there?
I think I started in January with Barry. Yeah, the first gig was in January.
In 1978, yep.
Yeah, I played with Marcia kind of right up until I joined, and I may have even done a couple of gigs after I joined, with Marcia. But, I can't remember. They must have called me up or seen me or something. I can't remember what happened, but it was 4 nights a week, and it was like a concert every night, the way it was set up. Ian Couch did the sound and all that, and the lights were great. It was just it was amazing, and the vibe was fantastic. And we were playing the music we loved. We loved the kind of funky sort of soul stuff, and we were all buying those kind of fusion type records, George Duke and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
And people used to pop in. They were on tour. The drummer, I think Harry told you this, Dennis Davis, who played with Stevie Wonder and David Bowie, he'd come and sit in with us, and people like Leo DeCastro would he'd drop in. People would just come up and jam. It was great times, really fantastic. Yeah, and
so
I learned a hell of a lot, with that band, and because I kind of had to expand. Barry would say, play a solo, and I'd start, and he'd go, come on, keep going. I think, oh God, So I really learned, whereas with Marcia Hines, I'd had one, 8 bar solo or something in the night, and suddenly I'm having to just extend, and I really learned to play, and I was kind of doing a lot of practice at that time, and easing what I'd learned into the playing, so it was a fantastic learning time for me.
So the Barry Leaf thing that ran for a number of years, and I'm sure you did tons of stuff sort of in between that, but also during that time, you start up your band, The Imports.
I was doing a bit of session work at the time, playing jingles and different things, and records for people. And I eventually I was working at the Mansell Room, which is pretty famous amongst us older folk, venue in King's Cross. And I was working with the Ron Barry Band, and Ron was a great singer. And Mark Williams was the other singer in that band, and Kevin Cooney was the bass player. and Peter Figgis on drums. And anyway, when we Kevin and me hit it off pretty well. And around that time, I was working there in the Mansell room till about 4 a.m. I get home like the sun was coming up, and the music was changing. It was like the punk stuff had happened, and new wave stuff, and the Police came along, and suddenly there was I'd been into jazz and all this, and suddenly pop music, things like the Police, it was suddenly like, oh, you could actually be a good musician and be in a pop band now, like it had kind of almost come full circle to how it was when I started, it was like interesting again. And I started writing a bit of stuff, and I got back with Malcolm, and we started writing all this crazy sort of stuff, funny sort of songs, and we wrote a few things. It was kind of like prog punk, if you can imagine that.
Right. Yeah.
And so I said to Kevin, I said that I'm thinking I want to form a band, with Malcolm, and would you be interested in playing bass in it? And he was ready for a change too. So we started rehearsing this band, and where there was a kind of bit of magic between us. It really sounded good, and we had a manager helping us, Steve White. He's a fantastic guy and great manager, did so much for us. And we were working like 4 or 5 nights a week, playing all original stuff, and or mostly originals, and our kind of heavily disguised covers, which we revamped totally in a sort of new wave style. And
cool.
It was great. Our manager, Steve White, was also tour manager for Little River Band. So he got us some gigs opening for Little River Band. And we did a little tour of Tasmania. And they used to stay back and watch us play every night, And, we got chatting and got to know them and everything. And after the tour, around about the stage when our band was falling apart, I got an offer, would I be interested in playing with them? And I said, you've got a guitarist, haven't you? Like David. And he said, it's not working out or whatever. And I said, oh, okay, well, I'll have to think about it. I wasn't sort of jumping in because I'd had my whole mind set on our band, but the band, it just was falling apart in the end. And then they called me back again. And I said, well, yeah, let's give it a go, Sort of, I didn't know whether I'd like to be in Little River Band at the time. You know what I mean? Like I was into what I was into, So I went down and we had to play together. And as soon as I played with them, they were all really good players and it felt really good. And I thought, oh, no, this is going to be great, So
that's cool.
I wouldn't jump into something just because they were successful, you know what I mean? Like if I didn't like it,
yep.
So
right.
So it came at the right time, and then we rehearsed and went off we did a few warm up gigs up in I think Twin Towns in northern New South Wales, and then we were off to America, and like. I think the second gig we played to 40,000 people. We were opening up before the Beach Boys. And it's like, geez.
Right. So how do you prepare yourself for that, knowing that that's come? You said you had a little bit of time to kind of think about it before you joined, and then you started rehearsing. Did you have any idea what it was going to lead to?
Maybe not quite, I had played pretty big gigs with Marcia because Marcia's band was really big at the time, and we played on the steps of the Opera House and all sorts of things, but I think you sort of you get prepared in your head for this sort of stuff, I always saw myself when I was learning as imagine what it'd be like to play to big audiences, you know.
Yeah, right.
And all that sort of stuff. In fact, you know, big audiences, when it gets to 40,000 people, it's sort of ridiculous, you know. I'd rather play in a theatre or something like that, you know. There's more of a feeling of I love to see the people right in front, and you can still see some of the people further back, and there's a real feeling of you know, if you're playing and they're listening and feedback, you know. But it's not bad playing with 40,000 people.
Yeah, not bad at all. Now, like when you watch you play, you very much move your whole body when you play, your head, your shoulders, your arms. When you're sitting down, especially, I was watching one video the other day, and you're moving your arm so much that the strap fell off your arm, but you still keep playing.
I didn't notice.
And then I saw a couple of Little River Band videos too, where you're just like you basically move all over the stage, right?
Yeah.
So where did you develop that? Was that just a natural thing, or did you think, well, I'm going to be playing these bigger stadiums now, it's time to put on more of a
I've always
a physical show? Or
I've
you
always
like,
you know, if you see my brother, actually, we move in
does the same.
We move in
right.
a similar way.
You do.
We play
Absolutely.
different now, but we both sort of. It's almost like we're going to fall over, but something's holding us up. and
it's a good workout.
Yeah, it's just. But I think you know, I think playing. When I played with Normie Rowe, he always just said, smile, you know. I still never really do, but it made an impression on me that I'm not, you know, just here to be a mopey old person playing guitar, you know.
Yeah.
So that made an impression. But one of the early gigs we did, the band opening for us was a band called the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, which are a really big band, you know. They had a hit with Mr. Bojangles was a big hit for them, you know. And John McEwen, he was, I think, kind of the leader of the band. He was a really nice guy, and he took my wife and myself out and showed us all around Laurel Canyon and all the places where it was all happening, and, you know, with all, you know, those bands like Crosby, Stills and Nash and all, you know. So he took us around, but he spoke to me, you know, like, at one of the gigs, he said, "Oh, have you been playing in little clubs all the time?" And I said, "Yeah, you know, I've been playing the Manza Room and all the different things, and small stages." He said that you've got a big stage now. You don't have to stand in the one spot. You know, you're moving, but you're just standing. I thought, "Oh yeah." So that made sense. So then I sort of just, you know, did what I normally do, but moved around the stage as well, you know, so which was good for a band like Little River Band, because they were always stuck on the mic singing, you know, so there was no one, you know, there's no one doing that, and it made something for people to watch, you know. Yeah,
because watching some of those like videos that I was watching, you're right. You're seeing, you know, the singer's up to the mic, and then by looking at the screen, you're kind of off to the right, and you can see you're moving. You know, you've got like a big stance, and it's just another another place for your eye to go. You know, instead of just looking at three dudes singing into a microphone.
So
you know?
So it works well, and it's quite natural for me. You know, now I'm back in small stages playing in pubs here and things, so I can't do that. Yeah.
Another example of you really using all of the stage was that 88 Expo performance.
Oh yeah.
With Glenn Frey, and you're up on the kind of up on the podium sort of thing there, and then you just came off. You came all the way down the front, across the front of the stage, nearly knocking everybody out with the headstock of your guitar, and it was brilliant. Loved it. Great.
Sort of feels funny when I watch it.
So not long after you joined the band, John Farnham came into the band.
Yeah.
So what was and where was this? This was obviously before Whispering Jack and
quite a few years before.
Yeah. With him coming into the band, how did the dynamic of the band change?
You know, I thought he was fantastic with the band, and it's funny because, you know, you do gigs and people people know the songs and he's a great singer, so they liked it. And, they say, oh, the new singer's good. He's a bit deeper than the other one. He's actually higher,
Yeah.
But he was, like we'd do these live TV, like he'd sing live on Solid Gold or something, and people, you could see the people working on the show, they were looking at him, blimey, it's incredible, this guy, he was blowing them away.
I watched a video yesterday of you guys performing Reminiscing live.
Oh, yeah.
It was in a theatre, and the video that I watched, it had I think there must have been two cuts of it. There was the like a TV cut, and then it changed from that sort of pumped up audio to the raw audio footage.
Yeah, I think,
and you do a massive solo in that towards the on the outro of that song, but I was just drawn by John Farnham, just the way he the expressions on his face, and the way he signals to the crowd and signals back to the band. It's just, I've got goosebumps talking about it.
He was great, and we worked together really well too. We'd work off each other. Which was great. Yeah, it was really good. I really enjoyed playing with him. I did a little tour for him after he left Little River Band. I did about a month tour or something with him with his band as a guitarist. Two guitarists had left, and I filled in, and that was fun. Right,
and this was before Whispering Jack.
No, this is after.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, after he'd left the band, had gone and done his own thing, and then I was free, so he needed a guitarist, so I went on tour with him. That was a buzz. Yeah.
The other big personnel change that I want to talk about is correct me if I say his name wrong, but is it Derek Pellicci? Is that how you say his name?
That's it. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Nailed it. And when he left and Steve Presswich came in, now I'm a massive Steve Presswich fan. Yeah. Through his stuff through Cold Chisel. So I mean, because Derek was, the drummer almost right from the start up to that point. Yeah. And then having Steve Presswich come and play, how was that dynamic?
Yeah. Well,
what was that like?
Yeah. We had a few auditions and tried, and we tried some really highly rated drummers, But Steve came in, he could do the shuffle, Yeah. And, it's the little things like that, like some people have got all the chops in the world, but they just can't do that shuffle, it's got to swing,
That's it.
And Steve was great. We got on really well. That was a really, it was a very creative time. We David Hirschfelder was in the band, and he'd just got the Fairlight. The Fairlight. You know what the Fairlight is?
Yeah.
And that was the instrument of the time, and we were working on, and we were going to the studio, and he'd record. I've got a 100-year-old mandolin, and he'd record me going, and then on the record, the whole chord playing this tremolo mandolin part.
And awesome.
And we'd all we'd all rehearse around the Fairlight or whatever, and we put all the arrangements together. It was really creative time. It was great, but the record kind of stiffed. We kind of followed the record company always wanted the band to be a bit tougher, more what they called more album oriented stuff. And there was AOR at that time meant album oriented rock. And we went their way. We used the producer they suggested, went the whole thing, and then that market kind of died in the arse, and I don't know, it just didn't work out. And plus, we put the record out under the name LRB instead of Little River Band. That was a mistake,
Right. So, which album was that? Was that
Playing to Win?
Playing to Win, right?
Yeah.
But a couple of those songs were hits, though, weren't they?
Well, Playing to Win got played a lot, but it was never really a hit as such, So, and it was a hit in certain. It's interesting because in certain parts of America, it was a big hit. I met musicians actually, who lived in I think maybe it was Missouri or somewhere, and mentioned that, like Little River Band, Playing to Win. I said, how come you've heard of it? It wasn't a hit. They thought it was a hit where we lived,
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
See, I was telling you earlier, I used to play along to Little River Band songs to practice to when I was learning drums. And the cassette that I had was a greatest hits cassette, and it's the green cover with the LRB logo on it. I can't remember if it was called Greatest Hits. The tape version had When the War Is Over on it as the last track. Yeah. I hadn't heard Cold Chisel's version of When the War Is Over at that stage because I was in New Zealand and I wasn't really hip to Cold Chisel in New Zealand. So that's the first version, and that's the version that I learned and just got blown away by because it starts with the synth. Yeah. And then John Farnham's vocal in it is just unbelievable. And then, Steve Briswich comes in with that drum fill.
Yeah,
and
he wrote the song. To me, you know that?
Yeah, I know he did. I did. Yeah, I didn't know it at the time. And then I came to Australia, and then I joined a Cold Chisel cover band.
Oh, right.
And that was one of the songs. I'm like, oh man, playing a Little River Band song, and they're like, what? It's a Chisel song, man. And had to go back and brush up on my history of Australian music. But that was the first version of
It's a lovely song.
Stunning.
I'd loved it before Steve joined. I'd really loved that song. And it was great that we recorded it. So. Yeah.
So how did that come about that song got re-recorded and put onto a Little River Band album?
I think it was just an obvious choice for John Farnham to sing, because it really suited him,
Yeah.
So, and plus we all loved the song, so.
Yeah.
And, Steve was writing some good stuff, Yeah, really, really good stuff. Mm. Yeah, it's a shame he passed away a few years ago. And, I hadn't seen him for ages, and I called him up, and I was leaving Australia, and I said, "Oh, we'll get together next time," and there was no next time, unfortunately,
Right.
And we used to get on well. He was a great guy.
Yeah, I got to see him play live with Chisel when they toured the Last Wave of Summer album. Yeah, and we were sitting sort of off the side of stage, looking down on him side on. And it was just great. It was just for a young up and coming drummer to actually see him play was just awesome. It's really good.
Mm.
Yeah. So No Rains. That was the last album that Steve Prestwich and John Farnham played on. Is that right?
Yeah. And so I think when we were doing that, John he'd already started Whispering Jack, so his heart was gone to that, Not that his heart wasn't in the album, because he performs fantastically on the record, but he was ready to move on, And we did one more tour, and Steve had left at that point, and Malcolm Wakeford, who I'd played with all the time, he did the last tour. That was the last tour with Farnham. We did about 12 gigs, I think, in Australia, yeah.
Yeah. What were you doing in between? Was the LRB thing a full year-long thing, or were you doing stuff in between?
If we didn't work, I'd be doing other things, I did a few sessions and things, but the band came off the road really after Playing to Win, which was before No Rains. And which is a bit of a disaster for me. I just bought a house and finally saved up for a house. And not only did the band come off the road, but the economy went into a really bad recession. Inflation went up and interest rates went to 18%, and it was just ridiculous, And I was just hanging on, but out of it came a lot of good stuff, when you're in what am I going to do sort of thing, you figure out to do something and it can push you in a different direction. And around that time, I started doing seminars, teaching guitar and stuff like that, sort of that sort of thing, a few workshops and things. I was playing some gigs with Wilbur Wild. Do you know Wilbur Wild?
Yeah, from Hey Hey.
Yeah,
Saturday.
From Hey Hey, yeah.
Only from Hey Hey, yeah.
And he said, he used to call me up and say, do you want to play golf? He's a mad golfer. I say, all right, And he said, and then he called me up one day and said, you want to come and play? I said, what, golf? He said, no, jazz. I said, I can't play jazz, I said, I've never considered myself as a jazz player as such. He said, no, you can do it. Come on down. So I joined his band, and we had about 3 gigs a week or something, playing jazz venues. Really good players in the band. The drummer, Phil Henderson, it turned out, this is in Melbourne, and it turned out he grew up just 2 suburbs up from where I was living in Sydney, and I'd never known him, never met him before.
Right.
And we got on really well, and he's a fantastic player. And he ended up playing on my instrumental album, New World Groove, later. So that was, and when we played a lot of stuff together. And also I had another band called Broken Voices with Graham Goebel, and he was playing drums in that as well. So that was kind of, besides getting the chance to play with Wilbur, and Wilbur really encouraged me. It got me confident that maybe I could play jazz. I still don't consider myself a jazz player, but there's different ways you can play jazz, and I guess I'm more of a jazz player than most rock players, put it that way. And I use all the jazz knowledge in my rock playing. So yeah.
Gotcha. And you were playing. You did some work with Renee Geyer and around that time.
And that would have
well.
been around this time too. The first thing I did with her, I think, was she was doing a show called Sing to Me, I think. And Harry was there. Mark Kennedy was on drums in that. And I think Jamie McKinley, who also passed away recently, fantastic keyboard player, and he also was in Marcia Hines with me for a while too, So around the time I was working with Harry, Bruce and Renee, Harry and me were doing a gig. I'm not sure if it was Renee or what it was, but someone came up at the end of the gig and said, would you be interested in doing Dr. John? And Harry was already booked, and I ended up doing it with myself, Rick Grossman on bass, and Malcolm Wakeford on drums. And we weren't actually really familiar with the music, I'm embarrassed to say, but Dr. John was incredible. He was really patient, and he more or less taught us the stuff. And by the end, we were rocking, It was a really good, I got a desk tape, and it's really good. So, that was a fantastic experience. And at the same time, before I went on tour with Dr. John, I'd rehearsed to go on tour with the Bushwhackers, which is totally different kind of music. And I'd rehearsed with the Bushwhackers so that I could do my last gig with Dr. John and then fly to a place and do my first gig with the Bushwhackers and have to remember all that repertoire, So, and I was taking Tommy Emmanuel's place in the Bushwhackers. And previously, Tommy had taken my place. Doug Parkinson, I did some recording with Doug, and he'd wanted me to be in the band, but I think I was playing with Marcia or Barry, and Tommy took my place. So we kind of taken over for each other different times.
Yeah.
So the scene in Sydney back then was fantastic, and I just, I lived in Melbourne for a long time. When I joined Little River Band from 82 until we came here in 99. But I never really, I got into the scene a little bit in Melbourne, but Sydney's where I grew up, learned to play guitar and got to meet everybody, There was a very close scene. Everybody knew everybody and everyone jammed together, and it was a fantastic time, That's, what I remember the most.
So you're starting to, after a bit of financial disaster, so you're starting to build yourself back up now financially.
Yeah, we got by, we were getting by. I started doing There's a guy in Melbourne, Ron Lee. He's got a music store, and he's a really nice guy. And he said, "Come and do a workshop for me." So I put a band together with the guys from Wilbur, Phil on drums, Craig on bass, and we learnt, say, we'd do a Shadows song and a Wes Montgomery song, and all different episodes through my journey as a guitar player. And I talk about guitar playing, talk about the equipment, and I talk a little bit about scales, how I'd learnt stuff and modes and that sort of stuff. And at the end of it, and I was really nervous, but when I got into it, I was digging it, because when you do something like first time, you're always nervous, like having to stand up and speak to an audience for 2 hours,
Yeah, that's what they say. Public speaking is one of the hardest, most stressful things you can do. So anyway, at the end, a couple of people come up and said, "Would you be interested in teaching something about the modes and all the theory stuff?" And I thought, well, yeah, I didn't think anybody would be interested, maybe, but because I learnt it so late, I played for about 15, 16, 17 years without knowing any theory. I could read a bit of music, but reading music is not understanding theory. It's just understanding where notes are on a stave. So I figured if I could learn it, because I learned late, I could probably explain it in simple terms to people and have an empathy for people that don't understand it, which most rock and roll players don't or didn't at the time. So I started, the only way you're going to be able to teach something is kind of write a book about it almost. So I started writing it as if I was writing a book. And I put a whole, basically 6 hours worth of seminars together covering how chords worked and how scales worked against chords and explain it step by step. And I started doing those things. I'd call up a music store and say, look, if I came to your store for you, you could pick your customers who you think like it and they could pay a fee. I get some money and you get the goodwill and everybody's happy. And it worked well, and I still get people sometimes on Facebook writing to me today saying, I went to one of your seminars, whenever it was, back in the 80s, and I learned a lot, thanks, which is awesome, Oh, great. That's awesome, all right.
So that, and then from there, I was doing a seminar in a shop in Melbourne, and the guy there, Russell, he said, have you ever thought of doing something around schools? And I thought, oh, no. I thought about it, and I thought I'll put a band together. And so Derek was in that band, bass player Bruno de Stanislow, and then girl singer I was working with, Susie Ahern. She's a great singer. Anyway, so I put the 4-piece band together, and we called the show So You Want to Be a Rock Star. And I went to the Arts Council in Victoria, and they got a tour together for us. So that was a lot of fun. Like a year or two later, there's a big change in the music scene where kids were listening to Hendrix and all the 60s stuff. I think part of it came from that movie Wayne's World.
Right.
And in Wayne's World, they were doing the Foxy Lady with the, and it was a big kids movie with all the 60s stuff. And after that, they started playing a lot of stuff on the radio. And by that time, I'd put a one-man show together for schools, and I'd have someone come along and help me and play a bit of rhythm in one tune, but it was mainly it was one-man thing. And I called it The Evolution of Rock Guitar, and it was basically the history of rock and roll. It was an hour show, and that was great. It went over really well. And I could do all the old stuff, because I could go through the whole history of rock. And the kids were with me totally. They knew all the songs. They were playing them on the radio. It was that time when radio went to retro. We couldn't have done that 2 years ago. It wouldn't have worked, So, and that was good. Those are the sort of things that got me by, And plus the little tours like the Dr. John and the Bushwhackers and the session work. And around that time was when we did the Glenn Frey thing, the expo. We did with, I think the single was out then, the single I co-wrote, which is Love is a Bridge, and that was a hit in Australia. And we did the Expo 88, which is a real big deal. Now, I was nervous for that one, I can tell you now.
Yeah.
And that's the one I'm running across the stage like a maniac. That was probably just nerves. It was kind of a big deal because it was live around the world, you know.
Yeah.
And to get to the stage, and it was in Brisbane, you had to get on a boat to go around the back of the stage and doing all that sort of thing. I was like, oh, blimey, this is what's going on. But you know, you get up on stage and you play your ass off.
Yeah. So how did the Glenn Frey thing come about, though? Was he going to be in town? And
no, I think they just
sort of
they want to make it spectacular, you know, and have a Glenn Frey or somebody who was Glenn Frey, you know, just have something extra besides Little River Band. So, and then
I guess what was it? What I watched a couple of those performances on YouTube yesterday, and what's particularly cool is like you guys are all you're playing. I mean, there was Lying Eyes.
Oh yeah,
was one of the tracks there, and you guys are all playing that, and the harmonies were just. It's like, I mean, because in some circles, Little River Band was called like the Australian Eagles, you know, with the harmonies and that kind of stuff, and you know, just to see you guys playing that Eagles stuff and doing those Eagles harmonies as Little River Band was fantastic.
Yeah, it was a blast, you know, and the harmonies were good. They always have been. There's been a level that, you know, the band's always maintained a real high level. That's why the band's still consistent now, you know, and people still rave about it because there's always this high level of harmonies, especially, you know. But there's always a high musician level too. So
that's it. Yeah.
So
that's it.
And you know, if you keep that level, you can keep working. You know.
That's it, eh?
Yeah. You've got to keep the momentum going.
Yeah. So after 88, after Expo, did that, I mean, I guess being live worldwide, that surely would have opened some more doors.
We did some tours, you know, in general, but a couple of things we did that were interesting. We did a couple of Hilton tours, and the Hiltons suggested we do like we did with Glenn Frey, that we get a guest artist to come out. And the first tour we did, which might have been the end of 88 or 80, early 90, I can't remember. Around that time, it was with Christopher Cross. And he was a great match for the band. And it was great. And it was great chatting with him, you know, and sort of chatting backstage, saying, what's your favourite record? And his favourite record was Axe as Bold as Love, Jimi Hendrix, which really surprised me, you know, because he's kind of very yacht rock sort of style, you know. And so, yeah, and him and his wife used to babysit our daughter. So my wife could come watch our show and all this. They were mad about, they wanted to have a girl. I think they eventually did. And I lost touch with him, but I'd like to get in touch with him again. He's been very sick too. He had COVID. And really affected him bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know have you heard of the Inside Music Cast podcast? It's two American guys, and they interview sort of the LA session guys and that kind of thing. Well, their latest episode coming up, which I think is in a couple of weeks, is Christopher Cross.
Oh,
so
right.
I'll send you a link to it once it comes out, and you can have a listen. Yeah,
yeah,
and that will be him talking, you know, as of, you know, not long ago.
Yeah, he was a nice guy. It was good, and then later we had Warren Zevon with us. And Warren, I loved working with Warren. It was great, you know. It was kind of an odd pairing, I think, with Little River Band, really. But I've got a desk tape of that, and it's fantastic, you know. I think we played really well, and he was great. And after that, we
you did a drum workshop with Chester Thompson.
Yeah.
Now I love Chester Thompson. First time I heard of Chester Thompson obviously was with Genesis, but first time I had the Phil Collins But Seriously Live VHS cassette tape, and there was Chester Thompson playing drums and Phil Collins singing obviously, and then he'd go on to double drums and Lee Sklar playing bass and all those guys. So I just would study him in that tape. So, what was that like?
It's hard to remember. It's hard to remember. I did that with Harry Bruce. I think Harry did a cassette of that. I don't know whether Harry records everything, but I think he put a cassette player on the floor, and it was somewhere like in Melbourne in the town hall or something. And I know it was great, and I wish we got videos of things like that, those sort of things. We just jammed, we just, start a groove, and he'd probably start a groove of style, and then we'd join in, And we did one with Carmen Apiece too. Yeah, I used to do a few things, a few things like that. I did another workshop thing. I was at a music expo with John Entwistle on bass from The Who. Yeah, he was a nice guy too, really cool guy.
That would have been cool because you were saying earlier that you're listening to The Who.
Yeah.
To be there playing with with one of the most influential rock bass players of all time. I mean that's something else.
Yeah, he's a really good player too. I tell you, he's really good.
Oh yeah. But you stopped touring with LRB in 2006.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was that decision based on?
Well, initially I wanted to record an album, and there was with all the travelling, there was never time to do anything. And so the idea was to get a replacement for me, and I'll take a year off, And they got a really good replacement that worked really well. And I started to just realise that living in Ireland and touring America was going to be incredibly difficult. I'd have to go and live in America basically, to have the stamina to do it. And the band was going so well that I just stayed not working with the band. But I still do a lot of stuff, record stuff for the band and write stuff and all that. I'm still involved, but it just I started to get into writing, and I realised that when I've got the space to do the writing, I can be a writer, and it comes easy to me, When you're playing all the time every night too, you're expending a lot of energy, which could be for writing.
Yeah, right. Especially if you're playing the same, not taking anything away from the material, but you're playing the same material night after night, which you already know, back to front.
So I think it's worked out good. I think I was just finding travelling very hard to keep at it. It's a lot of fun when you're younger. Everyone brings mixtapes. You're doing listening to each other's music and all the fun that happens. And and after a while, it just changes.
Yeah, I gotcha.
And
you started doing a series of interviews with famous guitarists in the US, and I went through and I watched all those trailers.
Yeah.
What happened? Why didn't that follow through?
Yeah,
that could have ended up being a really cool thing.
Yeah, it was meant. The idea was we were going to do a documentary on guitar playing, the history of guitar players and all that sort of stuff. And I did so much research on the whole history of everything, and I put a lot of work into it. And we did all the interviews, and they wanted me to play with. They wanted something a bit different, so I would play with the people, And I mean, for me, just having done that is enough for me. It was incredible, playing with Steve Cropper and Reggie Young. Reggie Young's not that well known as a player, but he's played on incredible stuff. And just, he'd sit there and he said, I played this for Elvis. And he'd play the opening to In the Ghetto or something like that. And it's a simple thing, but just hearing him play it, it's like, wow, And he played Dusty Springfield, Son of a Preacher Man. And
on YouTube, there's like a playlist of all those like trailers. So I just hit play and I was just listening to them all. And then every now and then I'd have to go out of screen to do something else. I think I was typing some notes for this.
Yeah.
And then the next thing you hear is the intro to Preacher Man. Like, fuck.
Yeah.
It's got the guitarist from the intro to Preacher Man. So I'd go back into the video.
Yeah. What happened, we went to PBS in Washington and everything, and they would have been behind the show, but there was one problem is we shot it just before HD came out, high definition, and so it wasn't in the modern thing. And the two brothers that were running it, there was a point that they didn't agree on. So what ended up happening is it just got released as hour-long me interviewing the guitarist and playing with them. So they go for about 40 minutes to an hour, and you can buy them on DVD, but I should try and get them to just release it on YouTube or something, I think.
Totally, yeah. People are still going to watch it. Stuff doesn't have to be HD, I don't think.
It was if it was a documentary, it would have been, it was a shame, but just kind of everything clicked over at that point.
Yeah. But, what they could do is probably like modernise the font, the intro part to each little video. They could probably modernise that. I mean, the videos are fine as what they are, but
I think if we'd have done the proper documentary, it would have been. You really, it's a lot of work. You got to have someone to direct who really knows. BBC do this stuff really well. It would have been ideal to go to the BBC. It was a good idea, to interview all these. I would love to, interview. There's so many players I'd love to meet, and they're not so well-known players. They're guys that just, you know them because you've heard them on record, but most people would never have heard of these players.
I mean, it's like it's similar in a way to this podcast. I mean, I get to sit and talk to the people that I grew up on or inspired me or had something to do with my musical childhood. Just about everybody I've talked to is kind of linked to that somehow.
Yeah,
it's just awesome. It's magic for me. I love it. Okay, so let's talk about some of your other solo projects or band projects. Sort of outside LRB and since you've retired from.
Yeah, I might just mention sort of how I got into Irish music, maybe.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
In 1983, we were about to, with Little River Band, we were about to go on a European tour, and we played a gig in England, and because my wife's Irish, we just thought we'd do a little visit to Ireland. We had a week that we'd better go and visit her relations and all that. And before we left, I'd been doing jingles in Sydney for a guy named John Gillard, and his wife was Irish, and he put me onto this record by a band called the Bothy Band, which is a big traditional band in the 70s, and I'd never been interested in that sort of traditional Irish music at all, far from it, and so because John was raving about it so much, we were talking about what sort of music do you really like, and he said, this is it, So I got the cassette, and on the plane on the way to Europe, where I'd be visiting Ireland, I put on headphones and listened to my Walkman, and which we had at the time, and put this Bothy Band on, and I was like floored. I couldn't believe it, so much rhythm, but then I listened, so much rhythm, and there's no drums, there's no bass, but there's so much rhythm, So that was the beginning in 1983 for me. I got involved in, back when I got home, I went on tour again to America. I bought a mandolin, started learning stuff on mandolin, Irish stuff, drove everyone nuts on the bus in America. And soon after that, I think Ernie Rose, who was producing and engineering the Little River Band stuff, he hooked me up to do a session for Bruce Woodley from the Seekers. And there's other session players on the record were the Bushwhackers. And it was, the record was called I Am Australian. And it was, the Bush sort of influenced stuff. And I played acoustic probably and a bit of electric. Anyway, I was sort of showing, because I'd introduced Little River Band to this Irish stuff, and we did an electric version of an Irish thing off the Bothy Band album, which would lead into Night Owls, one of our hits, and then it's like so I played the Bushwhackers this little thing of what I'd done. I said, realising I was probably on a similar wavelength to where they were for this sort of stuff. So they said, Tommy Emmanuel's just left the band, and would you like to do some gigs with us? So that came about. And I got kind of involved in that folk scene, It was miles away from what I was. And I played with those guys and guys in different entities a lot. And I did a little project, a Celtic project, where I got together with Dan Burke and Tony O'Neill, who were part of that band. Dan played fiddle and Tony plays fiddle, mandolin, everything, banjo. And we started off just arranging traditional stuff in a sort of a different way that people, we'd write a different section to the song and add that in. And then we got the guys from Wilbur's band, Phil and Craig Newman on bass and Phil Henderson on drums. And we got a bit of time in the studio and put about 7 tracks, some of them that I'd written and some were arrangements of traditional stuff. And that, it has never been released, but that was I was on such a buzz when we did that. When you do something that you're really proud of, there's some magic happened, and everyone involved felt the same way. So I'll try and I just have to release it actually, put it up on Spotify so people can hear it.
Yeah, good stuff.
So that was me getting into Irish music. Then we moved to Ireland at the beginning of 1999, and when I moved here, Monday nights would be a traditional session down the pub, and I'd if I wasn't on tour, I'd walk up with my guitar and sit in on that. This is winter time around the fireplace. Just musicians.
Yeah, cool.
And then you play a few tunes, they bring you a pint, a pint of Guinness.
Great.
And and I got to know a few people. Then I got to know Noel Redding, Jimi Hendrix's bass player, had lived in this town for 20-odd years, I think maybe 30 years actually. And he played every Friday night at this pub here. And I went one night and Noel was playing guitar at the time. He started out as a guitarist before he was with Hendrix, He just played bass and he got the gig with Hendrix as a bass player.
Yeah, right.
And, and he fitted, he worked, he was great. And anyway, so I talked to the bass player because Noel was playing guitar, and I said, do you think Noel would mind if I get up and play some tunes, So he said, no, it'd be fine. And I had my guitar and plugged in, and then I'd just go every week when I wasn't working in America. I'd go and play with Noel. And that's where I met Les, the drummer, Les Sampson. And we just played together for many years. And when I formed my own band, the Kings of Kudos, Les became the drummer. And we've just got a whole repertoire of stuff that I've written, basically. And we have a bass player, Mike Gainey, and we're a trio, just like the Imports were and like Nitro were.
Great. Do you still you were talking earlier about the Imports and Nitro, being small 3-piece sort of outfits. You've got that sort of space. Are you sort of going into the Kings of Kudos with the same sort of mindset?
Yeah, you have to. You have to kind of. It's a drag in some ways. There's certain things you just can't do. Certain things require a chordal instrument to make them work. Like if the bass is going to be vamping on one note, and you want chords underneath it, and then you want to play a melody over the top in a different area, it's just you can't do it. But. So you just have to do what works,
Yeah.
And sometimes I can play chords and melody at the same time and make it work,
Going back to those early days, those sort of 3-piece bands and, having that space and also with Barry's band, just being a 3-piece most of the time. And then going into LRB with, being you were the third guitarist, is that
Actually,
right?
Barry played guitar, so he was fourth.
Okay, he did too. Yeah. Sorry, that's right.
Yeah. And a great player too, great rhythm player.
That was actually the last gig that I went and saw, which was a couple of months ago. Was Barry Leaf's band at Palm Beach before the whole Northern Beaches lockdown. So that was really cool. What I'm saying is like. You go into LRB and there's, you're the third guitarist and there's keyboards and there's like all that vocal harmony and how did you find your what am I trying to say? Your spot, your place to play. Like was that hard at first? Trying to find your space, or did they tell you? Yeah, did they tell you?
They sort of. Basically, when I joined the band, they wanted me to be myself, and play the way I play. But obviously, if I was playing a hit record, like some of David Briggs' solos were really melodic, and so I would learn the solo if it was a melodic part of the song. If it was an obvious improvisation, something like Night Owls, I would just improvise, and play it in a similar vein, but it wasn't necessary. As some songs, they're like a middle eight, They go into a solo and they're a little melody. So those sort of things I'd learn, and they were enjoyable to play as well, I probably put my own little twist here and there.
Yeah, the fans get to know solos and stuff as well, don't they?
Yeah.
And then that's what they come to expect. Yeah. Sorry, I just had to ask that.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll go back to Kings of Kudos.
So the Kings of Kudos, and we just mainly do local gigs, and we've recorded. We've got about 2 hours, or at least 2 hours of original music, and which we haven't recorded at all, but we're getting there, and we were lucky enough to get together a couple of times this year. And in times when it looked, first time we thought, oh, we'll have a bit of a run because we'll be able to do gigs soon, and that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And then there was another time when there was a bit of another break. We could actually get back together again, and we put down some backing, put down some tracks, and one of them I've just put out, which is the latest one. It's called All Washed Up. So.
And there's some video of you guys rehearsing that, isn't there?
Oh, there is, yeah.
Yep.
And I could mention also, I was talking about the Bothy band before. Yeah, a couple of years after we just moved here, we were. I was doing a bit of session work for a friend who's doing an album, and the engineer. I walked in one day and he was mixing something and listening to something. I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Oh, it's Paddy Keenan. Paddy Keenan used to be with the Bothy band." I said, "The Bothy band? They're like, like for me, they were the Jimi Hendrix of trad music, Irish trad music." And anyways, I said, "Oh, gee, I'd love to play on that, just be part of it. And he said, "Look, I'll run you a couple of tracks off. Go and put something down, you know." So I took it home because at the time I had the Roland hard disc recorder, you know, and I put some. I didn't put acoustic. There's already acoustic on it, so I put some sort of ambient swirls, you know, with echoes and a bit of electric guitar on it, you know, and I took it back next day, and P.S, the engineer, said, it's really good, but I don't know what Paddy's pretty traditional. I don't know whether he'd like it, you know. But it turned out Paddy heard it and he loved it, and he wanted me to play on the whole album, but I couldn't because I had to go off on tour. But it was such a blast for me because, and then quite often when he comes into town, he always gets me up to play with him, you know. I mean, you know, it's like playing with, you know, like it's because I'm not a trad player as such. It's like, you know, like getting up with Wes Montgomery or something and being asked to play jazz. But for some reason, every time I get up, everything clicks and it's magical, you know, and it's unbelievable. Yeah. You know, it's something, when I first heard the Bothy Band, did I ever dream that I'd be playing with the Elian Pipes player, you know? And I suppose when I heard Hendrix, did I ever dream I'd be playing with Noel Redding?
Right.
It's funny how life goes, you know.
What inspires you? What inspires
me? I feel pretty inspired. I feel inspired by being in Ireland. You know, I think there's a certain musicality in the air or something. There's a soul to the place. It's been through some terrible stuff, you know, and you can feel it. But the people who have sort of risen above it, and music is part of that, you know. There's just something happy but really sad in Irish music, you know, and I feel kind of inspired being here, you know, and I think it's weird, you know. I haven't been writing in the last month or so. I've been, you know, just finishing up stuff and Christmas and all that. But quite often, I just walk in and I pick up the guitar and I just start playing something. I don't think about it at all. And suddenly there's a melody there, you know what I mean? I don't know where it comes from. If I think about it, it won't happen, you know. And I'll have a little run of doing that, just picking up and writing. Then I'll put it down on whatever. Now I've got the new microphone. I can use that, or stick it on the iPhone or whatever, you know. And then I might forget about it for a few months. And then I'll go back and I've got a pile of tunes. And now I'm working with the flute player, Margaret Kennedy. And we have a duo called Dream Beam. That's kind of opened up. You know, we play all instrumental stuff and she generally plays the melody and I play. It's good for me because with someone else playing the melody, I can play more intricate rhythm parts, you know. So having that has really opened up that I'll write things. I don't have to write things that I'm able to play, you know. I can write things that someone else can play, and so that's yeah. So I write a lot. I don't think about what style I'm writing in. I just write whatever comes to me, which is sort of good.
Oh, it sounds like you're in a good place for it. That's really cool.
Yeah, I enjoy it. I just enjoy going with what comes to me, you know, and then going through it all and see what fits with what, and they can be different projects. Yeah.
Well, Stephen Housden, this has been great, man. Thanks so much for spending your late Saturday evening with me and this early Sunday morning with me. It's been cool. We've been trying to do this for a while, so it's good that we've done it. And I wish you nothing but good luck and success with all your new music and whatever other projects you've got going. And thank you for inspiring me. Through the years, the stuff that I heard of you, and it's been really great.
Well, thanks, and I've really been enjoying your podcasts. I must say, I'm really pleased to do it, and I listened to my brother's one couple of times now, so I wouldn't go over the same stuff as him. But Jack's a great guitarist. I must say that my brother's an amazing player, and whenever we can, we play together. And but he'll play something, and I'll think, gee, how can I follow that?
Listening back to Jack's podcast, I mean, you were incredibly inspirational on him, obviously. So.
Yeah, it's really funny because I was around there once, and he had an imports tape, and he put on this he put on a bit, and my solo came on, and he starts singing along with it. I said, how do you know this? He said, I learned this back in the time. Blimey,
Yeah.
But he's got his own style now, totally his own, which is fantastic. But there's still a Housden-ness to it somehow, And, I don't know. It's not like we play similar, but there is something more so in the way we move, I suppose. But that's great. We have great fun when we get a chance to play together, though. It's really good.
Yeah. So people, we're talking about Steve's brother Jack Housden, and if you want to go back and listen to that episode, that is episode number 59. So I'll go check that out. Check out Steve's brother. All right, Steve, take it easy, man, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye.
One last cigarette and a glass of warm champagne. I guess it's time to button up, face the hurricane. Too old to dream, too young to know. I'm all washed up, and I've got no place to go. Better pack my suitcase, grab my hat and catch that midnight fly. Nobody to blame, no bullet to bite. No time to kill, no valley too low. I'm all washed up, and I've got no place to go. I should never have left that small town rock and roll band. I've been too long with my head in the sand. People used to dance, everybody knew my face. Now I'm out of touch, and I feel so out of place. One last kiss, Christina, and it's goodbye and fare thee well. I heard you cut your lover down and sent him off to hell.